Hi friends, I want to talk about gardening and plants for a moment, but this is not really about gardening as much as it is a spiritual matter. So you see this plant and this plant, they both endured some frost a few months back, but because they were in the back of my car. But they're healthy. They're still doing well, and even have some babies growing and some new growth here, and you can see the new growth. And I don't know which one of these was the first. It might have been that one. And I divided it up and made two planters out of the one, and then I divided it up even more and made a third planter, this one right up here. And sorry, there's an ad. So this plant has some new growth coming, some babies coming, but it also has, it has babies over here too. And I want to talk about that. And it also has this new flower shoot. I don't know why the wall looks like that, but anyway, everything's fine. So this plant in the blue container behind all these other plants, it's a little bit tight in there, and it's a little bit root bound. But you know, as a gardener, I understand that it's going to be time soon to repot it, but sometimes when something is root bound, it flowers. And when this plant flowers, such as this, what comes from those plants, those flowers, is these babies like this. So if we can think about that, it flowers after it's root bound. So why would I allow it to be bound up, root bound, and hurting like that? It also has all of these, I've cut these back, but I haven't just totally, completely removed them. But look how healthy that plant looks overall. It's got new growth, new shoots. It's producing babies. And all of these babies in these small pots, even this big pot, these small pots, even this one in the owl pot, they came from this one spider plant, also known as an airplane plant. These are all from the same plant, three plants out of one, and then so many babies, because I keep taking these little things and putting them in tiny little pots like this. So this was a highly productive spider plant, airplane plant that I bought, right? I divided one and made three, and then from it, new life came. All of these babies, these are not the only babies. I promise you, I've given a couple to my aunt, one to my niece, probably my mom too. Some other people have benefited, friends have benefited from this one plant being so productive. And I want to talk about that. We know that the scripture says that the good seed can produce, up to 100-fold what it has brought, right? And with God, that pot looks a little sad, but it's all right. I just keep putting it in water right here in this big tray. When we think about that, a good seed produces much, right? It's very productive. But some, the scripture says in Jesus' story, doesn't have roots. See, that's got very small roots. So there's no root there. If I cut this right here, there's no root to go down into the soil. So this right here is still dependent on the parent plant. This right here is not ready. It doesn't have roots to separate from the parent plant. This child has to stay with the parent. This one is is starting to develop a root, but it's very small. This one has very, very small roots. So these are dependent on the parent plant. And that's significant. So we can think of ourselves. How many of us are mature parent plants? How many of us are a new baby shoot that's just coming out? Or how many of us don't even have roots well enough to be separated and we're still on spiritual milk? How many of us are baby Christians, just starting out making our own way in our own pot? How many of us are adolescent Christians? And how many of us have just literally, I just cut this off. I was going to show you, but I guess I already cut it off. Have literally withered and died. This one had some that had withered and died, and I just cut them off. That's a really significant way to consider. I mean, you can learn a lot from gardening. There's a lot of wisdom in gardening. You can see in this plant how many ways we can understand that scripture that Jesus was telling in the parable of the sower. So I would encourage you to read it, because these little plants can teach you about the different levels of our growth. Do we want to be mature plants that are highly productive? Or do we want to be that one plant that just literally is withered and dead and gets removed, cut off, just taken away? I just wanted to talk about this because I've been thinking about this plant, about how we can be root bound. And during our times of trials, we can produce flowers. Think about the flowers this plant is producing and what's going to come from those, the potential that God sees in us. Even though we're root bound and we're struggling, and we're still productive, and we're flowering. Isn't that beautiful? Maybe it's not as beautiful as I think it is, but it is beautiful. All right, I just wanted to share this lesson with you because I learned a lot from this lesson about gardening. Thank you, friend.